Hi, it's Sam Binga. I'm here with Future Music, and I'm going to take you through my track Tek Nuh Chat featuring Redders.
Yum them up like Batman. Oh, brand them up like rap. They won't even see me coming, cause they ain't ready for my rap. I'm gonna start this thing from the front, then I'm gonna roll it right to the back. How we heavy like a boss, how we got left the place flat. Rock a tat, give me slack, them can't do me like a brat.
Okay, how did this track start? I guess really what it started from was needing a big vocal track for the next EP. I know that sounds quite, almost cynical, but you are trying to put music in a certain world, and it's good to have a tune that will fit certain things. So me and Redders have worked together in the past. We've done some stuff which has gone down quite well. I've been working on a new EP for Critical, and I thought it'd be good to get a solid vocal tune to go on that EP. And I like working with Redders, and I like doing those tunes. So it's not like it was some kind of horrible, miserable, thing that I had to do. So that's kind of the sort of capitalist starting point of that track, you could call it, I guess. On a more technical level, what I'll generally do when I'm working Redders, or anything really, is start with a beat, which is, as in literally start with the drums. And the good thing with working with a vocalist is you can be a bit more minimalist in terms of some of the music you do, because you don't want to come out with some incredibly fully featured track that's got no room for a vocal. Plus, I'm really into producers like sort of classic Timbaland or the Neptunes, where they're doing a lot of stuff with weird drums, but not a huge amount else. You think about a track like Grinding or whatever, and it's nothing but drums. So I've been trying to bring some of that aesthetic into what I'm doing. So I just started off by trying to build a drum track, and looking back on it, it'd appear that I used 5 tracks of kick, channels of kick. We've got this kick, a bit louder, which is just a toppy kind of distorted one. It's got a bit crusher on it. It's got the bass cut out of it and a few peaks, the very top end cut down, just to get out a bit of character. Then we've got this other kick here, which is excitingly labelled as kick 2. This one, okay, that's a bit more of a punchy one. Again, really distorted. I like a lot of distortion on my sounds. It's an easy way to add character. I don't like things that are too clean and crisp. It can work for, for a lot of people that works really well, and certain styles you need things to be crisp, but I want to make stuff that sounds kind of rowdy, and it's got a lot of, almost sounds like the whole thing's been pushed to the edge of where it can be, and distortion is basically the result of that. So I put a lot of distortion on sounds. There's loads of amazing plugins you can get for it, but I tend to just use Bit Crusher because it also, it just works for me. So that's that. Third kick is, what's this one? Again, another toppy distorted one. You'll notice as well that all these things are just dragged straight into the arrange window. I've not built any samplers out of these really. It's just been a case of dragging them in. It's a bit of a sort of primitive way to work, but I quite like it because you can kind of really get in and move things around. You can pull things off the grid or back, early or late, and you can kind of see how the whole beat hangs together quite nicely as well. I find with MIDI, if you've got multiple channels of different kicks and they're all on different MIDI parts, after a while it can be hard to work out exactly what's lining up. If you've got the audio in there, it's like, bam, that's what it is, that's how it works, and it all goes, that's kind of the groove. This kick, again, quite a rough and ready sounding kick. So it's a lot of kicks, but they all add together to just give that kind of, that almost like huge kick sound that you get in a lot of hip hop, where it's got like, a big sub underneath it, which is what this one is. And then you've got all the stuff on top adding the character. So you kind of, all the kicks together come out like. So you've got all the different tails and the different characters of the kicks. Some of them are stopping earlier, some of them are stopping later. And that just gives you an interesting kick sound, which takes up quite a lot of the track. But then that means you've got that really solid bass, so you don't need to add a load of other stuff to it. I've got this snare here, which has got, again, a bunch of distortion. It's got a compressor on it, but that's mostly probably just to add character. I don't use a lot of compression in that kind of classic sense of like, evening levels out. I think that's really important if you're probably recording like a live bass guitar or something, you want to smooth it out. But if you're using samplers and software synths or even hardware synths, a lot of the time it's not a massive dynamic range. So you're using a compressor as for the character it gives to the sound. So yeah, that has just been pushed quite hard. There's a tape simulator. This is a free plugin, Massey plugins. I think it's really nice. More distortion. There's a guitar amp on there, and that just it's trying to make the snare sound weird and lo-fi. If we take all those off, it's got much more treble, much more kind of body to it. It sounds a lot nicer, but I'm not after a nice sound. It's going to a bit of reverb, which is tight, 0.6 of a second, just to give it a little bit of space. Clank, clap. Yeah, and again, a sort of fairly horrible lo-fi sounding clap. That's got a massive boost at 400 Hertz for some reason. Without that, yeah, just bringing out some of the weird catches of that sound, so it sounds a bit odd and mashed up. This thing I've labelled funk snare. I think that's the same. Yeah, it's the same sound as the main snare, but it's a bit quieter, and it's on the ghost note to give the whole beat a bit of a bounce. So if we look at the whole beat together. That's the sort of basic groove of the beat. I guess at this point I should say as well that like we're working at 172 BPM, which is a sort of drum and bass speed, but the whole beat's half step, so it's kind of like the equivalent of like a dubstep feel, but at that tempo. And I like that because it means you can mix it with other half step tunes and keep that kind of hip hop feel, or you can layer a full speed drum and bass tune over it, and it just gives it a bit of a different groove, which is nice, Okay, then I've got a cowbell, which is adding something in. What's that doing? Okay, the cowbell is actually layered over the kick, and that just obviously at this point I was like, that kick's not got enough things going on. I'm going to put a cowbell over it. So that's worked all right though. These things here I've got labelled as LeBlanc, and I think this might have been from a Future Music sample CD way back in the 90s. Of Keith LeBlanc doing a bunch of drum stuff, and I use these all the time. They're brilliant. They're quite clean recordings, but just as part of just as little side ghost notes again, which just kind of fill out the groove and give it that interesting thing. And I probably just chopped them straight out of the drum loops, didn't put them in time or anything, and just moved them around till they're sort of enough in time that they worked, but they've still got that kind of weird feel, which gives it that groove that you wouldn't maybe get from programming it exactly. So happy accidents, it's all about happy accidents. That makes it sound like this might be a massage parlour. That's happy endings. Anyway. So yeah, if we put that all in. Actually, I think they're mostly just layered over the kicks and the snares, and again, they give it a bit of character, just a little bit of extra sound over it. We've got some hats in here, which, nothing too complicated. Again, it's just audio dragged in directly. They're just over the backbeat, because having taken all the treble off the backbeat, obviously I was then, I need some treble back on it. But so I've got layered a hi-hat over it. I think one is naturally panned a bit to the left. Yep, and then one's panned to the right. Yeah, I think it's the same sample, I've just alternated them, so each snare is the top end of it's moving. One snare will hit to the left, one snare will hit to the right a little bit. The main body of the snare is central, because you want to keep that solid centre. But again, just anything to kind of catch your ear, these little subtle things that's just moving around. So yeah, that's what's going on there. Okay, then I've done, like, a lot of the stuff beats I've done, I end up putting loads of weird sounds in, which just add a bit of, which you wouldn't maybe normally build a drum beat out of. So this is labelled pop. What is it? Aha. That amazing sound is me going. So yeah, and that again just sits. Where does that sit over? If we zoom in, that's coming on the off beats, and then yeah, that's just kind of sitting in the groove. It's adding a subtle kind of ghost note. Ghost notes are when a drummer, you've got your obvious kick and your obvious snare, and the drummer's just kind of doing a few little fills in between. I'll try and recreate that feel, but without using a snare. So you kind of get in the groove and the funk that those different sounds give you, that those placements give you, but with different sounds. This track is labelled Smush. And what does it sound like? Okay, right, so that's some weird digital noise that is going backwards. Why is it all right, so that's okay. That's a sample of some glass breaking. I did not know that. So yeah, and I've just chopped a little bit out of that to give a sort of weird. Yeah, what have I done? I've spread that out. I've put a bit crusher on it. I've taken the bass off it, and I've faded it in. I think. Yeah, it's a big fade on that. So that just gives a little into one of the beats, into the backbeat actually. So you rather than having the backbeat hit fully sharp, there's something leading into it, kind of anticipating it. This sound labelled Smush 2, where's that? Okay, so... okay, that sounds like I chopped a bit of it and made a slight rhythm out of it. Again, just anything to sort of take a weird sound and use it as part of the beat. This thing here is labelled Buzz. What does that sound like? What's that from? That looks like it's a bit of noise from a recorded from the sound card or something. I don't know what that is, but it might have even been like the tail end of a sample, or when I was recording a microphone, it was just a bit of digital noise that I've boosted, and then distorted and EQ'd. Yeah, so it's just a tiny little bit of noise at the top, which again just sits in and gives the impression of like being a bit like a hi-hat or a bit like a snare or a clap, but it's not any of those things. It's like a sort of unique version of doing that. Chucker. What on earth is chucker? So those are two sounds panned left and right with a bit of delay on them. So yeah, the one... No, they're not even. I don't know what they are. Right. That's me saying chucker. Right, that's why it's called chucker. Okay, so that's me actually going chucker chucker. And then I've distorted it loads, made it quite lo-fi, downsampled it, cut all the bass out of it again, and I've pitch shifted it 2 semitones down. So, it's not particularly amazing sound, but as part of the whole groove and the whole beat, it adds that character. Okay, we've got two sounds here called Noise 1 and Noise 2. I think they're they're off YouTube, so they're going to sound kind of lo-fi anyway because they've got the YouTube compression on them. I think they're from an weird old Siberian music movie or something. Had them knocking around for a while. Again, they're just an interesting texture which will build up into part of the beat. I like using noise in beats because when you mix it all down and you put a bit of bus compression on the whole thing, because the noise is quieter than the main kicks and the snares, it'll compress nicely, it'll get some movement, and it'll just kind of, again, gives it a sort of bit of shape to the overall beat and glues it together quite nicely. And yeah, there's loads of sources of noise you can use, and everyone's got its own character and will be a bit unique. So yeah, that's that. Something here called Word, which comes in occasionally, which sounds like this. Ah, right. That sounds again like it's some random recording off a film, which that's been put in occasionally towards the end of a bar. Just adds a bit of a groove to it. That's most of the main part of the beat, I think. There's some hi-hats that come in to sort of lift the beat later on, which sound a bit like this. These are being sent to, again, a tight reverb, 0.15 a second, which has got a phaser on it, just to give it a bit of movement. And you can hardly hear it, but like with reverb in general, a lot of these times, just little ones you don't really hear, they just give it a bit of space and they can kind of sit in there. So the whole beat, built up to there, sounds something like this. So all those kind of weird sounds, which on their own didn't make much sense, and you probably thought, what's he doing? You put them all together, and in between the main kick and the snare, They just give it this interesting shape, and everything kind of moves in. And you know, you've got certain things that anticipate a main kick, or they come after the main snare, and just the whole thing works together to create an unusual beat, but it's got a kind of certain funk in it. Now, because this is a vocal track, I'd have probably got to about this stage, and then I'd got Redders involved. He'd have come down, and we'd have started working on the vocals together. We worked together for a while, and I think it's important with the vocalist, you know, the more you work with them, the more they get an idea what you're about, and you get an idea what they're about and what their strengths are. I knew I wanted to work with Redders from before AO, because I'd heard some of his stuff with Red Light, on like the first Red Light EP, and he's just got such a lot of character in his voice that it doesn't really matter almost what he says. And like, he's actually an amazing lyricist, but what we try and do when we work together is not so much worry about, you know, whether the lyrics are making a deep, profound point, but more they've got character and interest, and they're gonna catch your ear. You know, it's club music, and yeah, that's the vibe. So he'd have come in around this point and sat down and started writing vocals, and I just let him get on with it. And I'd have been building the beat a bit as well. Like I probably put there's a thing here, like a little an 808 ride, which would have come in to lift it on occasion. Offbeat 808. The sound here called the key mug, which the name is a clue. We'd have got a mug. I've actually got a mug down here right now, but yeah, it was a mug that I would have hit with this very key, and recorded and put in a EXS24, and so then that's a little percussion, and that's quite a nice little sound actually. Comes in here. Yeah, just a little bit of percussion. And again, I love doing stuff like that because I'm the only person with that sound. You know, you might have a mug, you might have a key, you don't have that mug, you haven't got that key. So, you know, but you know, it's anything like that to make yourself a bit unique. That's what and you know, there's so many people that have got, everyone's got a Mac now, everyone's got Logic or whatever, and everyone's got X amount of sample packs. So if you want to sound different, don't use the stuff that comes with your Mac, and don't go use a bunch of sample packs, you know. That's my approach anyway. So yeah. He'd have come in, he'd have been writing some bits and bobs, and I think then I also built this little bass line to come in after a second, which... And that sound, I mean, I do love synthesis, and I've got a few sort of hardware synths here, but to my eternal shame, that is an ES1. It's the square wave of an ES1, and there's not really distortion in it really. There's a bit of small reverb. The main thing is it's really heavily sidechained off the kick, so every time the kick hits, it's just a raw sound. And I think, like, again, in a world where a lot of people spend a lot of time making really complex sounds, sometimes coming with something that's really simple will stand out. And when I play this tune out, when that bass line hits, people go nuts. I mean, in fact, I'm always surprised by it. People really like it. And it's just a simple square wave, you know, it's all it needs to be. Again, that's kind of, I listen to a lot of grime and stuff, and like so much grime is kind of basic sounds done well, and there's a lot to be said for that, you know, just taking a simple sound and working it. So yeah, while Redders would have been writing his verse, I'd have put that in, I think. There's also a little bass fill here. Let's have a look, which is this thing here, which comes in every 16 bars. Come on. Let's see what that sound is, shall we? So, it's some kind of square bass again, with a bit of glide and portamento on it, and a bit crush. You take the bit crusher off. Somehow the bit crusher gives it almost like a second rhythm in it. So yeah, the way that the bit crusher interacts with that pitching sound, yeah, and again super lo-fi, it's giving it a bit more character. Complete accident. I have no idea it would do that, but you know, it did. Great. And while that fill comes in, I think I programmed a little 808 hat and rim shot over the top. So yeah, that would have been that. We're lucky in this studio in that we do actually have a separate vocal booth, which is through in that room. You can't see it now. But to be honest, something I found with recording vocalists is a lot of the time it's more important to get a vibe than to maybe have the most perfect acoustic recording. Like, you got someone in the most amazing space, but they don't feel comfortable, or they're not relaxed and having a laugh, yeah, technically the acoustic might be better, but you're not going to get the best performance. And like your average listener, or in fact any listener, or even an advanced listener, they respond to how someone delivers it. You know, you'd rather hear someone that sounds like they mean it in a slightly not perfect space than a beautifully recorded dull vocal. So Redders would have recorded this vocal pretty much there, you know, spitting. There's no real treatment on the mic. It's not a particularly amazing mic. It's a Rode NT1. You know, you can spend. I've had people come down here with, you know, £800 AKGs, and they sounded good, but I preferred the sound of that. It works. It works for Redders' voice. I know how to mix it. So it doesn't matter necessarily if you've got the best equipment or whatever, because I definitely don't. So yeah, Redders would have just recorded that, spitting there into pretty much that space. It sounds all right, but the main thing is that I can hear what he's doing. I can react. I can vibe off him. You know, if he makes a mistake, we can laugh about it. And the actual end of the track finishes up with some outtakes from Redders where he managed to mess up, and this sounds quite funny. So yeah. Yeah, and you know, you can hear me laughing in the background. You can hear him taking the mickey out of the way he mispronounced a word. You can even hear one of his chains jangling as well. So that's just that kind of the vibe that you build in the studio being more important than the technical aspects being the best, perhaps. By this point of the arrangement, I don't have the version before where it's just a bunch of takes. I've already chopped it up quite a lot to get, you know, original backing track. Something else to say about vocals is some vocalists work really well layered up. Like I've done some stuff with this guy Ryder Shafiq, who's an amazing vocalist. His voice sounds great with maybe three copies of the same vocal. You'll have like a central one and then two spread ones, and that gives a really rich kind of thick sound. But Redder's voice doesn't work that way, you know. So there's no one right way or wrong way to do it. Redder's just sounds good, a single decent vocal. He's also he doesn't like to drop in. He'll do the whole 16 in one, and we'll keep going until he can spit it smoothly. And I think that way, when you hear it, you're hearing it flow properly. I might then go back and use different takes and put certain words that sound better in from it, but generally you're trying to hear, like, you get the impression of it being a single take. So let's have a listen. What have we got?
Nyam them up like Pac-Man, blam them up like Graf. They won't even see me coming, cause they ain't ready for my wrath. I'm gonna start this thing from the front, then I'm gonna roll it right to the back. How we heavy like a boss, how we got left the place flat.
Yeah, I found with Redder's vocal it sounds nice, a little bit of slapback on it, slapback delay, that just gives it a bit of space and a bit of vibe without being too big. You know, yeah, reverb on vocals is a weird one. I tend not to use much of it. This has just got a little bit of tape delay on the quaver. No feedback, it just literally coming back into it, gives it a bit of character, sounds quite interesting. So yeah, I'd have gone through, recorded that, chopped a few bits in to make it sound good, and then we've built a bunch of ad-libs over the top, which is all of this stuff. This took ages actually, because, you know, I get loads of ad-libs from Redders, and
Nyam them up like Pac-Man, blam them up like Graf. They won't even see me coming, cause they ain't ready for my wrath. I'm gonna start this thing from the front, then I'm gonna roll it right to the back. How we heavy like a boss, how we lift the place flat. Give me a slap, and them can do me like a prop. And then, that's all it is, right?
So yeah, there's a whole bunch of ad-libs, some of which are panned left and right, some have got chorus on, some have got a bit of reverb, some are really high-passed, some not so much, and that's a good way with these, because with a lot of these tracks, it's just a 16 bar. You know, we've got the first 16 bar with less ad-libs, and it'll repeat, and it'll step up a gear by just having all the ad-libs in it. And so you kind of get this, when you listen to it, you get the energy of the extra voices coming in, they're popping in here and there, and it's kind of some there, some back. It gives it a lot of energy and life. Listening back to that, I was actually quite slack. There's a bunch of clicks in it that I should have sorted out. I didn't fade out the different chopping. I feel quite embarrassed about that now listening back. But you don't notice it in the finished thing. So, but anyway, kids, you should always fade out your vocals because you get clicks on them, like here.
Nyam them up like Pac-Man, blam them up like Graf.
A little bit of clicks in there. So, yeah. And then once we had that vocal, I'd have kind of laid it out. It's a 16 with less ad-libs, a 16 with more. Then we go to the sort of instrumental section, the bass line section. So again, that's just kind of Redder's freestyling over that once I'd done that, and then me chopping out the bits that worked and building it into a sort of phrase that progresses. That whole section kind of builds up. There's another reverby square wave that's got a bit of spring reverb on it to give you that sort of reggae kind of sound. Which then leads into a reprisal of the original vocal. And then I think then the next session he came in, we decided we wanted to sort of switch up a little bit so that after that middle breakdown, we come back in and there's a new vocal. And yeah, so we'll come back in and we'd have gone for more of a singing kind of feel, which is this one here. And earlier I was saying that Redders tends to sound good with just a single main vocal. Here, because he's sing-jaying it, we've got 2 takes.
Yeah, I take no chat, but man not take no chat, cause I'm a bigger fish and them are just a little sprat. Yeah, I take no chat, but man not take.
So yeah, and they're slightly different pitches. One's panned a bit right, one's panned a bit left. And again, it just kind of lifts that section. It's a different delivery, it's a wider vocal. Again, it just steps that section up, so you've not got the same vocal sound the whole way through. That can work, but for this one, it's like, okay, it's a new delivery, let's just switch the whole way it's mixed as well.
No chat, no, I make me react, get deep on the track, yeah. I take no chat, but man not take no chat, cause I'm a bigger fish and them are just a little sprat, yeah.
Yeah, going back to kind of idea about this sort of what I want from the vocals with Redders, you know, that lyric, like that demo, what is it again? I don't even know what the lyrics are.
Cause I'm a bigger fish.
I'm a bigger fish and them are just a little sprat, you know, that's an unusual way to phrase something, that I'm a big fish and they're a little sprat, you know, rather than just saying I'm a bad man. It's like a different twitch on that, and that's what I like, that's what we try and go for, little phrases that are going to catch your ear. And that's come from working together with the vocalist and kind of building a relationship. We perform together a lot as well. And so we're kind of more on the same track as to what's going to actually work for us. Finally, the next section, the sort of other section of the track would have been the intro, which again I think is probably it's an ES1 straight out of Logic. It's got a bit of reverb. It's got a filter, which I'm just using the auto filter, but just for a bit of distortion. There's an LFO mod on it, and that just kind of builds up. And then tune drops. So again, it's not a complicated synth. It's not any particularly special programming, but it's just kind of got a bit of character. 16-bar intro, tune drops. It's all good. There's a few bits of percussion from the main drum groove over that, so you've got something to mix it against, but without dropping the full beat. And by this point, you've pretty much got the, you know, we've got to the point where we've got the whole track laid out, arranged. The sounds are all about there, and it's kind of sounding okay. Now, because this is quite an old computer, and also just for other reasons which I'll get into, what I'll do now is I'll go through and make stems. As if I was going to send the track off for a remix, I'll bounce all the kicks together as one, I'll bounce all the snares as one, or most of them. I'll take them all as individual stereo 24-bit files, and I'll start a new project with it. And this is good because not only does your computer run faster, because you've not got X amount of tiny little audio files, psychologically, you know, like it's very often you'll be working on a sound and you'll be thinking, yeah, this has got to be right. You know, I've put 12 plugins on it, I've done all this stuff. Yeah, it sounds right, and you're kind of kidding yourself that it's the right, you've done the right thing, because you can see all the work you've put onto it. Then when you bounce it down and you've just got a single audio file with none of the plugins, none of the older work you've done on it, you can just be like, oh wait, there's no treble on that, and you realise that you'd kidded yourself because you've seen all the plugins, but there was something really basic wrong with it, and somehow starting again almost will let you see that clearly. It's a much simpler arrangement. These are all the drums. This is all extra stuff that I've added. With the rim shot fill, the key mug, the ride cymbal, the main subby kick, and the bass line. So I've put those on separate channels to be able to match them properly. The square wave bass line, the lead, the intro synth, and then the vocals. So it's a much simpler arrangement. You can get around it a lot quicker. You can see what's going on. And also, it's obvious that I listened back to it and I thought that it didn't have enough backbeat on it. So what I've got here is, what is this? Is this a rim shot? yeah, I'd have listened back to it and I'd been like, all those lovely lo-fi snares and claps that I had, they've got a great sound, but there's no transient on them. So I'd have layered like a rim shot over them, which quite a garagey rim shot. That just gives that transient and it really defines where the start of that snare is, and a bit of treble as well. So that's worked out well for that. You know, that's a problem that I wouldn't have probably seen if I'd kept it on that other one. I'd been like, oh, but there's 12 billion snares, it must be perfect. And it's really not. What else have I done here? Like you can see on this the rim shot fill that goes over the bass fill. I think the the 808 hi-hat that I put in was coming out too much, so I've been able to chop that out and turn it down a little bit. So you know, just things like that, mistakes that you make, you can kind of rectify them here, or you know, sort them out in some way. What else has we got? See how much quicker the computer's responding now. Well, like I see, yeah, here I think the fill before the tune drops.
Yeah.
I thought it wasn't coming through enough, so I've just doubled it to make it louder. So, you know, all those kind of things, you can fix the problems. I mean, I've got a bunch of hardware here. On this track, I haven't used a huge amount of it, but to make the intro synth, because it was just such a basic ES1 sound, which I've got here as an audio file. What I've done as well is I've taken that sound, I've ran it out through the patch bay into this fairly rubbish Soundcraft Spirit Folio desk, distorted it loads and recorded it back in, which sounds like this. Sounds pretty horrible, but then when you mix them together, you've got much more quiet than the main one, and that sound just got much more character. And I often think that like anything you can do to run stuff out and get distortion that's not a plugin is great, because you get mistakes in it. This Filter Factory is really good for that as well. It's actually a pretty hopeless filter nowadays because it's knackered, but you can get some great distortion out of it. On Left M, the chord in the intro, I'd run that through this sampler, which lets you, it's an old Yamaha sampler, it lets you change the record setting. Where is it? Yeah. So like CD quality is 44.1K. At the moment I've got this set to 11 kilohertz. So all the treble will be gone. You get loads of aliasing. It'll sound mash up. I'd have recorded the intro chord for Left M into this, bounced it back in, and because as well this thing doesn't bounce exactly in time, when I put the two chords together you get a phasing, and it's a really slow phase, and it works quite well. So yeah, anything like that you can do to sort of take it out of the box and give it weirdness, and you can get an old sampler like that for nothing nowadays. I mean, that thing's had it as a sampler, but as an effects box it's quite useful. Also, I think in the process of recording that synth, the intro synth through the desk, because the gain was up so much, all the kind of the hum and the hiss was being amplified, I ended up getting this little sound out of it as well. Which is just like mains hum and maybe a bit of a click from something starting. And I've layered that of the intro as well, just to give it a... Binga back again! Again, it sounds like... You can't really hear it in the mix, but it just gives it that sort of impression of like, yeah, everything's pushed to the max and like things are about to break or whatever. So that just adds a bit of character. And then beyond that, the vocal, yeah, I'd have sent most of the drums to a bus. There's a limiter on the bus just to catch some of the peaks, and this Sony Oxford limiter's got this enhance function, which is a bit like their inflator plugin. Just kind of glues things together, adds a bit of grit, bit of warmth to it, and it makes it sort of more apparently loud than it actually is. There's a bit of an EQ on it, which is giving it a boost in the mids. So that's all the drums going to a bus. Nothing else has been really bust. I think I bust a few things. I think I bust the snares in the previous arrangement already, so they would already bust, so I didn't need to do too much to them. The synth, yeah, the synth and the noise I was just talking about, they've been bust, and they are compressing off audio 27, which is the intro. So yeah, in the intro, those synths they sidechain off the vocal, so the vocal can come through without fighting with the synths. What else is on them? There's an EQ, which is adding a little bit of low mids onto those synths, and a compressor again off audio 18. I don't know, that's probably one of the drums. So yeah, so those chords in the intro are side chaining off there as things to get them out of the way. Then at this point, I've pretty much everything's balanced. I've done a bit of mixing in the old arrangement. I've done the final tweaks in this one. I've fixed the problems. I've gone through and it's sounding fine. My master output, there's a limiter on it which I had to put on just for me to make a home master to play out. I don't mess with it too much. There's a bit of, it's just a home, that's just literally limiting it to get to a level where I could play it out and try it out. Critical are very good. It's coming out on Critical, and they're very good at getting stuff mastered quickly. So before too long, this would have ended up as being a proper master by Bo at 10.8.7, and then I'm ready to play it out. So it wasn't too long I was playing the home master out. It's good to have a quick home master so you can try it out and make sure there's no major mistakes, or it's not getting a reaction in the club. But it seemed to be working, so I went with it. There was one problem with this, which I think, let's have a look. Something that I really hate in vocals is sibilance. And so you can see here, on certain words, I've gone through and automated the gain on an EQ just to cut out certain words that were, certain syllables like T's and S's that were popping out too much.
Up that graph, they won't even see me coming, cause they ain't ready for my rap. I'm gonna start this thing from the front, then I'm gonna roll it right.
And that sounds alright, because it sounds like it's about the right level of ducking for those things. You can get rid of sibilance by like de-essing, which is often a little bit sort of, it's a bit hard, it can sound a bit too much. It's easy to over de-ess something and you go from like stop to thop and you sound a bit like you're lisping. So I often go through and I'll automate, I'll find on an EQ, I'll sweep it through and I'll find the point where it's really peaking on the S sound, and then I'll automate again on that. So when it's like saying stop, I'll just for this, I'll cut I'll put the gain down on that EQ band, and then I'll also do the same thing with the master, like cutting the whole vocal channel just down for that. The problem I had here was that listening through to it, it sounds fine, but actually I'm taking out like 10 dBs of gain on these things, and it turned out that actually in the playback Logic wasn't playing back what it was doing. So I learned from this, which is like when you're doing a pre-master, don't just bounce it offline, bounce it, listen through to it, because when I bounced it offline, Logic actually took out 10 dBs on those things. When I got the master back from 10.8.7, he'd cut what I'd sent him, and on certain of those vocals, it was just ducking out. So we had to recut the vinyl, had to go through and fix it and like undo a lot of this EQing and make it sound right again. So yeah, that was my mistake entirely, and a good lesson to always bounce your pre-masters, listening through them, no matter how sick of the tune you are by that point, which is probably quite sick of it if you're me. So yeah, that was the final stage. Yeah, cut it, the vinyl came back, sounds great. And really happy with it. So there you go.